Warning: viewer discretion advised. Contains scenes of nudity from the outset.
Something a little bit different this time around. Hopefully something a bit easier. The last few builds have taken me a lot longer than I thought. Also a change of scale in a way. Not literally scale, but a bigger thing. We've got a, yes, it is a naked bantha. Can't unsee that, can you, once you've seen it? What a beautiful, brilliant character. There's so many great animals and creatures in the Star Wars universe. And this printed separately, so it's a fairly cheap 3D print. I'll put the link below to where you can get it. It was about $11 or something. Printed him on my filament printer. I think he's presumably meant to be printed in resin, but came out just fine in filament. And the tail and the legs print separately and so on. I, by the way, use a bamboo P1S printer, mainly the Faux Landspeeder Luke. It got me into all that sort of business. But I love it. It's so much fun. You can make your own toys. Incredible. So I'm going to cover him in fur, paint him up a little bit for his face, paint up his horns, and hopefully have an impactful statue or figure to go on the shelf for the Tatooine scene. I've also got his saddle here, but I think I'm going to try and make the saddle. I've got some foam bits from Hobbycraft, which is my local hobby store. So I'm going to have a go at that and see how we get on with the bantha. Let's get to it.
So the first big challenge really was finding a deep, long pile faux fur. This came from eBay. I'll put a link in the description. And once I had this was two-tone, which actually worked out really well. They didn't quite have the colours I wanted, so this is called brown on brown, but there's a lot of grey in there. So I mixed up some different types of brown spray and then gave it a couple of layers of slightly different shades, which I think gave the fur a real depth. So initially it's almost like olive brown, and then over the top a bit more red. And it looked really good, just by accident, really, so I'm really pleased with that. It actually reminded me a lot of the different shades that my dog has. I did think about using my dog hair to cover the bantha, but I would have had to shave him, and that didn't seem fair. So he got away with it for a bit longer. You can see then the contrast between painted and the original. I didn't even need all the fur that I bought, so I bought I think it was called a fat patch or something. It was 50 centimeters by 40 centimeters, and I still had loads over. And I started from leg up. I thought that would be the easiest way to go, and bearing in mind then you can layer as you go up. I realized then I've been an idiot for gluing the legs on. What a doofus. So this one wouldn't come off at all, which is a tribute to the glue that I used, which was Uhu, or Yuhu, or however you want to pronounce it. This is just a general purpose glue. I don't know if it's the most appropriate glue to be using, but it worked well. Probably used more than I need. I used like 2 tubes on this whole thing, but it's pretty inexpensive here, about £2. And wrapping then the fur around and just pushing the lining, the join to the back, so that it's not going to be too visible, and then pushing the 2 joints together. And because it's such a long pile piece of faux fur, it's really easy to hide the joints, so that was great. So once I'd made one of these legs, I just went along obviously and did the others, same sort of process, cut a piece to size, wrap around, and before you know it, he looks like a shaved elephant with 80s leg warmers. So I've got all 4 going on. There we go, pretty soon. Yeah. And from there, it was just kind of work around the tail, cut some shape so it fits around the tail and around the front bit. It's very satisfying to do because it comes together so fast. It was like, oh wow, here's half a bantha done already with just a couple of bits. Again, you can see I probably used too much glue, but hey, it's probably not going to come off in a hurry. Stick that down, and then I just wanted to work out how often should I overlap the fur so that the joins were hidden, but also that there was enough fur sort of dangling down. I decided to make a kind of central parting down his spine. That seemed like the best way to go in terms of which way the fur was being brushed. So I made the join down the spine, then cut them to size, just sort of blended it in as best I can. And even though it's going to be under a saddle, I decided to put a bit of glue down that central piece and then just hide the join a little bit with some extra fur. Didn't matter too much that it was getting messy. Once the bits of glue were dry, I was able to pick any messy bits out. And now I'm just covering the join as best I can. That seemed to work okay. Onto the tail, and a bit fiddly to get the shapes right, but no big drama, just gluing, trimming to shape, hiding the joins, same process really, all very straightforward, always sort of overlapping a little bit, just again really to hide the join, I guess. And then as I sort of finished up, I did a little bit of spray painting just where some of the colours were slightly different, so just to give it a bit of uniformity I used the spray gun. No, not spray gun, what's it called? Air spray? I don't know, you know what I mean though, the thing that sprays paint. And this bit on the end I actually made too long, so it was a mistake at first, but then he was left with a nice straggly bit to his tail, which actually seems to be what banthas have, so that was another happy accident. Just sort of turned out quite nicely that he's got this extra bit on the end. There's that spray gun thing I was talking about. Still can't think of the right word. Air gun, spray, I don't know. I wanted the mouth to be sort of dark inside, not completely black, but for it to feel quite reddish, like almost like the bantha might be an albino underneath his fur, or at least he's got quite sensitive skin, and therefore maybe that's why he's covered with so much fur. So I was painting around the ears and the eyes, not knowing how much of this skin would show through, and wanting initially to make it red and quite dark in the deeper sections, and then around the lips again I've got this sort of beigey sandy colour, and I made the two colours pretty stark in contrast, and then with a clean brush I just sort of blended them together. That's coming up now, I think. Yeah, here it comes. I don't know if this is how you really dry brush or blend or whatever, but it seemed to work. Did the same around the ears and then just blended in again. So I really liked the idea that his skin, where it was visible around his lips and edges of his nose and stuff, was really dried out by the desert winds of Tatooine. So that's what I went for, like a really sort of dry, crusty effect. And actually the print pattern from the filament print I think really helped that, because there's a sort of grain to a 3D print. You'll know if you do 3D printing, and it seemed to work quite well for his skin, particularly for his lips. Here I'm just going in, and you noticed I had the magnifier out, so I swung that across so I could see what I'm doing, and then got in there just a black for the eyeball. I looked at rhino eyeballs, at hippo eyeballs, at elephant eyeballs, of course, just to try and see, like, do they have a white iris, or what goes on around the eye? My studies were fairly inconclusive, so I ended up, and obviously you can't really see the bantha's eyes, so I ended up just sort of doing a slightly darker, not a whites of the eyes, but like a grey, like a muddy, mucky sort of grey colour in there. And so that's what I went with. And for the nose here, I used a grey blue and a black. I was thinking of giraffe tongues. You know, giraffes, they've got like these blue tongues, like blue-black tongues. And so that's what I had in mind for some reason, for his nose. The nose is, kind of grey when you look at bantha pictures, but when you look at photos, they're always slightly different colours, aren't they? I put the head to one side for a little bit and had a go at these packs that hang off the bantha's back from the saddle. And this is just like a felt, 50p sort of felt sheet, a bit of packing paper inside, and then just shaped like a bag. Tied it off with a bit of string that looks sort of vaguely leathery. And then, that was it really, just glued it all together. This was a fun bit. So coming up to the beard, hiding the seam of the fur under the lip of the beard, or under his actual lip, and then adding a second layer behind that, and then I think a bit more behind that. So I had 2 or 3 sort of layers of fur hanging down as his beard, maybe just 2, but that gives it a little bit of depth, I think. Makes it look like he's got a proper beard. Here, just again, then moving up the face, sticking bits down, cutting around the ear so it can poke through the faux fur. On his face, I noticed the bantha seemed to have short hair, so I just trimmed the fur shorter and stuck it down. And again, by chance, I think something cool happened. You can let me know if you think otherwise. Is just with the glue, the fur started to matte a bit, so it looked like it looked, I don't know, like short fur, like a different sort of texture to the rest of the fur, and it really seemed to suit the face. As I was gluing these down, I started to feel like maybe he was looking too much like a Wookiee. I say he, I mean I didn't really notice the gender as I was putting this bantha together. I don't know anything about the mating behaviours of banthas, and to be honest, that's fine. I'm comfortable not knowing. Here I'm just doing the moustache and then just trimming tightly. Weirdly, it looked a bit like he'd had too much of a haircut, so when I was trimming the hair, it's very hard not to get a straight line. Gave me a real new respect for my hairdresser, Alan. Hello, Alan, the best hairdresser in London. How he does it, I do not know. But I managed to sort of feather the cut by cutting down a little bit. And I actually found the best way to get a natural end to the fur was just to pull it away. Instead of cutting, just tug it away. And then it became very sort of random and much more natural looking, not like it'd just been to the barber's. And yep, just moving up the head now. Longer bits to the side, and I wanted enough so that coming off the back of the head that it would blend in, but not so much that it would get in the way, which is why I was cutting some off there. Yeah, and this was all fairly quick to do. Trying to do that feathering cut there. And then his fringe, he started to look like a sort of 1980s new romantic pop star as I put his fringe on. Just playing around with different lengths there. I was fairly happy. And then for the horns, I get to give them a bit of a sand down, and then I gave them a fairly thick coat of that Montana spray, which sort of hid some of the 3D print effect. And then I had that bone citadel paint layer, like a base layer, and then over the top this brown wash. And again, this was just a mistake really. I put too much on and then wiped it off and thought, oh, that looks cool how that kind of works there. And so I put a bit more on and wiped a bit more off and kept going in that sort of fashion until I ended up with something I quite liked. So yeah, sort of trial and error really, and then a few splodges just to sort of make it look a bit more natural. I tried to use the shadow, put the dark bits where the sun wouldn't get to it and bleach the horns. So we've got a bit of contrast in there, which was cool. The saddle I decided to use in the end and start with the 3D printed saddle. I primed it first, and then I went back to the Tuskan Raider because I wanted the colours on the saddle to be in the same palette as the Tuskan Raider, so I was just comparing his colours as I was mixing up for the spray. And I went for an olive sort of colour on the back and the rear pack there. And where's that, the front pack? No, that's the rear pack. And then for the front one, a bit more of this kind of mud brown is what I used. I didn't start again, I just mixed that into the spray guns bit, where you put the paint. My brain's melted today. Maybe it's all the glue. And then covering over the bits I was worried about spraying next to, and then with the mahogany, bits that I'm not going to cover with material, just this sort of edge trim, decided just to spray that fairly dark brown. I'm not worried about going over the edges because you'll see they get covered up in a minute, so I had a bit of a plan for that. But once I'd done that, I then went back to do this sort of tasseling bit, like the sort of rope trim around the saddle, and that was just these two colours, again sort of sandy, variations on a theme. Popped that on and realised, like, oh, I've put too much on, so then basically did what I've done with the rest of it, is put too much on, wiped it off, put too much on, wiped it off, and then I thought, well, why don't I just put less on? So I started wiping the brush on my desk there and just putting less on. Is that dry brushing? Does that count? I don't know. But yeah, just putting less paint onto the tassel, so it was had a bit of the depth of the print showing through, and then giving these colours onto so I thought it would be the saddle bit. So I found this piece in Hobbycraft that was kind of cool. It looked like suede, but on a sort of 1/12 scale, so it was lots of tiny bits on it. So obviously scale's really tricky, isn't it, with patterns and texture. I thought that might look cool as a piece of sort of faux suede wool thing that they might sit on top of the bantha. And then darkened it down because it just looked a bit too light, and just mucked about with it until I found what I thought was roughly the right shade. Then while that was drying, I went back and did a black wash over the packs. So this is the Vallejo Wash Effects in black. And like with everything else, I just put too much on and then rubbed it off and then put a bit more on until it sort of looked like something that was what I wanted. I really like this about painting is, you know, at the risk of sounding like Bob Ross, you don't have to get everything right. There's no, you know, accidents are fine. There's no mistakes, just happy accidents. Is that what he said? Anyway, I agree, Bob. So just sort of keeping going until you end up with something that you like. Very little that you do is unrepairable. And then just trimming this felt piece, which was the same pretty much as it came, except I did give it a little spray of just with a little very light cover of black, just to darken it down a bit more, and then stuck it down over the top of the main section of the saddle, and then cut the trim off so it all fitted nicely. I used super glue to stick it down. You'll have noticed that Loctite glue, again, might be overkill, but. And then this piece, I originally intended it to go round like this, but I didn't cut it out very well, so it looked a bit messy. And so I just reshaped it so it would only sit in front of the pack. You can see there I've trimmed it as it sits at the bottom. Just going to sit nice and snug now. And actually, I think I probably prefer it like that overall. Gluing it down with the super glue. Managed to stick my fingers together a couple of times. Classic. And then just weathering a bit more, you know, just covering over bits where the white was showing through, but also just making it look a bit messy and used. Classic Star Wars effect we all love. Everything's dirty, everything's got a history. And then I decided to put these ropes over the pack, which look really great actually. I'm glad I did. I noticed on Book of Boba Fett that they had ropes on the packs, so just gluing them in, sticking them down, and then darken the colour with a little bit of wash, and just with the super glue there, fixing them in, and then cutting to size, and that is pretty much done. Time for assembly.
So here he is. I am really, I feel like these bits at the end are just very self-congratulatory. I'm just surprised at myself that I was able to sort of, by chance really, by just sort of trial and error and keeping going, able to produce this thing. I mean, I didn't make the 3D print, that's the hardest bit of the work, I suppose, but really pleased with the texture on the saddle, and the decision to put some rope across the packages, I think, is a nice sort of finishing touch. Pretty pleased with the bags. I might go back in and do a bit more spray painting just to darken the face down a little bit, but I probably won't bother. I will go back in and redo the eyes because they've become a bit misty, what with all the glue moving around in there and whatnot. But yeah, I'm so pleased. The Tuskan Raider, I had to cut off the back of his skirt and slice up the front of his skirt, and you can see that, so that he would have mobility enough to sit on top. But that's okay, he's going to be displayed on there from now on, I think, and he can hold on to the reins. And at some point he'll sit in a big sort of Tatooine display, but I'm already struggling for room, if I'm honest, so I'm not quite sure where it's going to go. My next move, though, will be to print a little bit of a Jawa sandcrawler. I've seen a print of just the front lower half of the sandcrawler, so some of the tracks, which will be a nice sort of backdrop for some of that print. Might try the Lars Homestead, etc. I can't be the only person who's attempted to make a Black Series bantha, so please, in the comments, let me know how did you go, or push me, or link me to Instagram. I'd love to see what other people have done with this print and in this style. So yeah, let me know. If you've enjoyed the video, please do, and even if you haven't, to be honest, just do me a favor and hit subscribe. That would be really cool. Thanks massively to everyone who's commented so far. It's really encouraging and cool. The whole reason I'm doing this video is just because my wife doesn't want to hear me chuff on about my toys, action figures, anymore. So yeah, let me know what you think. I love chatting about this stuff. So put it in the comments. And yeah, look forward to chatting. See ya.
Chewie, get us out of here!